We're joined by East Texas Congressman Moran to talk about some of the most pressing topics right in D.C. and, of course, here in East Texas on what should be a good Tuesday out there. Congressman Moran, thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Nolan. Appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. We really appreciate it. I want to start with Donald Trump and his press conference just yesterday on that deadline that's coming up later tonight on the East Coast there. He also threatened to blow up every bridge and power plant in Iran as that deadline gets closer later on tonight. What do you make of some of his comments we heard during that press conference?
Yeah, I'm concerned about that. I saw his comments about destroying a civilization. Certainly, I do not support that. I supported his efforts at the beginning of the war to make sure that our national security efforts were supported and that we could get rid of the nuclear facilities in Iran and to make sure that there was no threat against Americans either abroad or here. But certainly I do not agree with and do not support the notion of destroying a civilization. That goes beyond where we need to go as a nation. We are a rightful and a just nation, and we have always undertaken our wars in that manner, and we should continue to do that.
Yeah, and then yesterday, also on Monday, Iran reportedly rejected that ceasefire proposal with that deadline approaching. What do you think the president's strategy is right now? Of course, we heard what he said during a press conference. Once this deadline approaches, what do you think he should be doing, and what do you think he's going to do? I know we're going to have to wait and see.
Well, I certainly agree with using overwhelming force to get to your objective. But again, the objective has to be moral and it has to be just. It has to be one of those that is a military objective that meets our national security interests at the end of the day. We've seen President Trump do this over time, where he has pushed the envelope on what he said and then come back to do something a little bit different when it comes to negotiation and to drive somebody to do the thing that he wants them to do, and in this instance is Iran. And so perhaps that's his strategy in this instance, but again, I certainly do not support destroying a civilization.
And then before I move on to another topic, of course, gas prices are everywhere in the United States, really rising. Here in East Texas, we see them getting close to $4 a gallon. If this doesn't end soon, like in the next 2 to 3 weeks, how concerned are you that they're going to keep going up, especially if the Strait of Hormuz does not open by this deadline or in the next couple of days?
Well, there is concern, although the oil and gas prices likely will be a short-term or at least just a little mid-term bump in the road. I think that that's an objective that we knew we were going to have to overcome to get to the final national security interest matter. But we need to bring those prices down quickly before the summer gets here. They're already hitting a lot of folks hard. We've got to be cognizant of that. We've got to end this conflict as quickly as possible.
Then I want to switch over to our big story here in Texas, that GOP Senate runoff race. You endorsed John Cornyn over not Senator Ken Paxton, Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton. Why endorse Senator John Cornyn? What makes him the best candidate moving forward in this race, especially going into November?
Yeah, I happen to think that character is important to conservatives, and we are a conservative district. In fact, here in the 1st District of Texas, we're one of the most conservatives in the nation. And when you look at this race, this senatorial race between Ken Paxton and John Cornyn, it's really a race between character and corruption. And as Louis Gohmert pointed out recently, in his opinion, Ken Paxton's really the most corrupt Attorney General in his lifetime. I was glad to see those comments because I agree. And I think that we as conservatives ought to look at the character of individuals and the pattern of conduct that they've had in their lives, both in their personal and in their public lives. And Ken Paxton really has a consistent activity of corruption, both breaching the trust of the public and breaching the trust of his personal relationships. And that should disqualify him from being in the United States Senate. On the other hand, John Cornyn is a man of character and has shown himself to be a man of character. And although I disagree with some of the votes he's taken over time, and although I would have taken different votes at times, he is a man that I think we can trust. And so I penned an op-ed that says exactly that character and trust should matter to conservatives. And in this particular instance, there's one man of character, and that's John Cornyn. There's one man of corruption, and that's Ken Paxton, and we should not cast our vote in that direction.
President Donald Trump said he was going to, probably about a month ago, said he was going to endorse one of the candidates. That hasn't come. It might be coming soon. It might not be coming soon. What do you make on that? And what if the president doesn't endorse somebody in this race? Do you think that could have a big difference, especially Ken Paxton and his favor to win?
Well, the president's voice certainly matters when it comes to who he endorses. No question about that. I have to say, I've never endorsed anyone in a Republican primary top to bottom. This is the first time I've ever done it because I really see this as a touchstone moment for the Republican Party as we're entering into this runoff race to say, what kind of party are we going to be? Are we going to be a party that values character? Are we going to be a party that values Judeo-Christian ethics and the principles that we were founded on? Do we agree and consent that indeed conservatism is based on those foundational principles? If we do, we must elect individuals into office that reflect those principles, reflect those values. And in this race, that's John Cornyn.
Moving over to of course, in D.C. with the DHS funding fight there. Any update on what's going on as that partial government shutdown continues into this morning?
Yeah, it looks like the president's executive order is going to get us to June 1st at least to help to fund DHS, and by then we will need to do a reconciliation process to fund ICE and CBP. The Democrats have made clear they're not going to fund ICE and CBP as part of the DHS packet. We are going to probably come alongside that as a parallel vote and fund the rest of the DHS appropriations bill, which was agreed to, by the way, by the Democrats and Republicans months ago, but the Democrats have played politics on this issue for a number of months now. So we are in a position where we're going to have to use that reconciliation procedure, which only requires 50 votes plus one to be able to get the ICE and the CBP funded, hopefully for a couple of years, so we don't have to deal with this political gamesmanship by the Democrats again. But we'll also then just follow the regular appropriations process and fund the rest of DHS by June 1st. So by June 1st, I think it'll all be settled. Before then, we've got the executive order in place to make sure our folks get paid.
And for somebody who, of course, is not in Washington and what you see behind the scenes, how chaotic has it been since this all started? It seems like there was this constant going back and forth, Republicans, Democrats. We saw what happened at airports, especially here in Texas, Houston to be exact. What's it been like working during this as you guys try to get something done?
Yeah, well, the one constant in Washington, D.C. is craziness. And so it has been a crazy time in Washington, D.C. But I certainly appreciate the opportunity to be there, to be a steady voice for East Texas, to make sure that I reflect the values and the voice of East Texas when I cast votes. That's my primary job, is to make sure that I am supporting the principles of the Constitution, our moral principles, and certainly the preferences of our district. And we're going to do that regardless of the winds and the waves, regardless of whatever else is going on in Washington, D.C. We can only control the things that we can control. And so we will do that to the best of our ability.
Absolutely. And then, of course, you've been keeping up with it. I'm guessing Artemis 2 space mission. They're now the furthest away humans have ever been from our great planet Earth. Talk about how great this is for America right now, especially on 250th birthday of America coming up later this summer, and then what this means for future space trips.
Yeah, you know, America is defined really by innovation and exploration and pushing the limits. We've got several markers of that in our history, and so I was so glad to see the Artemis adventure to push beyond where man had ever been before, because the things that we're going to learn scientifically as we push the limits, as we advance technology, as we innovate, as we finally understand more and more about what's out there, it's going to be a great time for, I think, the United States to regain the spirit of innovation and exploration and say, you know what, we need to push further. We need to learn more. These are the kind of childhood dreams that we create. My kids and I, my little 8- and 9-year-old and my wife, we sat around and we watched this launch together. And I remembered the days when my parents and I would sit around when I was a little kid to watch these launches happen, because there's something unique about that spirit within us that says, we want to push beyond where we've ever been before.
Yeah, it's incredible to witness live as it's happening. I want to ask you one more thing before we go to break. You wrote an op-ed in The Hill that came out yesterday. You addressed America's dependency on raw ingredients used to manufacture medicines. You also said in that quote at the very beginning, the U.S. is drifting toward a dangerous dependency on this. If somebody hasn't been paying attention to what we're doing overseas, specifically in China, what's going on and why are you concerned?
Yeah, our pharmaceutical industry is too dependent on China, and that's why I penned that op-ed that was published in The Hill yesterday to talk about the need for us to get away from that dependency. China's grip on not just pharmaceuticals, but the APIs, the foundational basic building blocks of our pharmaceutical industry, is putting us in a position where we have very little negotiating leverage with China when it comes to a number of different areas. And when you talk about foreign policy and military policy, it's really driven by economic policy, and that economic policy is driven by such dependencies of like we have with pharmaceuticals and with critical minerals and other things that we have given over to the Chinese over the last few decades, when we were the ones that were actually leading that charge for many, many decades. But now we've just abdicated our responsibility and given that to an adversary that does not want to see our country succeed. So we've got to take that back.
Congressman Moran, thanks so much.
Thank you. My pleasure.